edition or rendition of the Peter Tosh Symposium. Just to give you a background history, it's been running from 2001 here in UWI, thanks to Warrell King and Clinton Hutton. And you know, we're just keeping the ball rolling right now because Peter, in my opinion, has been underappreciated and has been living in the shadow, if you like, or has been in the shadow and still is in the shadow of Bob Marley. So, you know, we try and do what we can to articulate and showcase his legacy. We keep it moving on. And October for me is Peter's month because, as you know, his Earth Strong was 19th of October. I mean, Bob Marley's birthday or Earth Day is ingrained in most people's minds. We know 6th of February, boom. It has become fairly established day on the Jamaican calendar. So hopefully, in years to come, October the 19th will also be equally an established date, and not just the Peter Tosh fans will, you know, observe that day, so to speak. Anyway, I'm going to right now take the opportunity to introduce the first panelist, who is a dear colleague of mine. He hails from the Department of Government right here at UA Mona campus, and he is one of the foundational members of this Peter Tosh Symposium. He was right there, the very first one, 2001. And he has the distinction of not just being a philosopher and a political philosopher and a very powerful scholar in the Department of Government and at UWI in general, but he's a very, very powerful artist, right? He has paintings all over the campus and extremely talented at painting as well as writing. And he's a photographer as well, and no doubt he'll be multitasking and taking photos when he gets the opportunity, and photographing and documenting all of the events that happen on the campus, this one included. He has the distinction of founding the course on Jamaican popular music in the Department of Government, and has, you know, in this way extended the breadth of the government department. And so it's not just about political science, but also he has founded the course Roots, Lyrics, and Socio-Political and Philosophical Texts. Or I should say the full title is Jamaican Popular Music from 1962 to 1982, Roots, Lyrics, and Socio-Political and Philosophical Texts. So without further ado, I would like to bring Dr. Clinton Hutton to the podium. So let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks, Michael. Greetings, everyone. Greetings. Good. I don't have a title for my presentation yet. Maybe by the end of the presentation, the title will reveal itself. Just to say, though, that Peter Tosh's seminal body of work was on African freedom, sovereignty, and justice as central to his identity and the identity of all Africans, and as absolutely important to the existential viability of Africans. As he said, if Africa is not free, we'll be back in shackles, you see. There are the different aspects of his work that I've just talked about are interconnected, and they're also autobiographical. His campaign to legalize Ganja was central to his views about justice and his arguments about justice. as well as about his personal encounter with law enforcement and the Jamaican state. The criminalization of ganja was from the beginning directed against people who were categorized as deviants, social undesirables, the unwashed, the uncivilized, who were treated as moral and ethical, who were treated as in opposition to the moral and ethical compass of the British order. Indeed, in 1938, that uprising that eventually brought independence to Jamaica, the authorities argued that 1938 was a result of smoking ganja, so that the people's struggle for sovereignty, for independence, for justice, for freedom was all because they smoke ganja. And what happened in 1938 was a result of ganja smoking. And therefore, this categorized people and became a justification for what happened. A number of people were shot and killed in St. Mary, in Westmoreland especially, and even in my community in Jericho and Hanover. Speaking to the old historian of the community who has now passed. He was 17 then, and the soldiers were in my community, and men hide on the top of hills and roll down stones in the night on them. So that was 1938. 1938, as far as they're concerned, was the result of ganja smoking. Similarly, the Morant Bay War of 1865 was blamed on social undesirables who smoked as a form of worship. And these are things that they said, that the people who launched the Morant Bay Rebellion, they were smoking stuff, right? Who smoked as a form of worship, who danced as a form of worship, and who prayed out loud and ate and drank as invocation. The legislation of the legalization of ganja was never an issue in Jamaican political campaigns. I'm talking about political campaigns with the two parties. Despite the authorities on both sides, despite their constant use of ganja laws to violate the rights of citizens, this thing was never any central part of political campaigning in Jamaica, as far as I know, in studying political campaigns. It was never part of the manifestos of the political parties, despite the fact that these laws were used as tools to lock up people whose philosophy and cultural ethos they did not like. Remember, in the Carrot Gardens, the suppression that took place after, the justification for sending people to prison when they could not find any evidence just because they wore beards. what they actually did was to say that they have ganja as a justification to send them to jail. People who had nothing to do with caravans. They were used to further the prejudices of people in authority and the classes of people who support them. And they also get a lot of poor people to support this position. That's why it was never a part of political campaigns. Of course, we know now, based on study, that ganja was also used as a tool to categorize segments of the Jamaican population as violent, as lazy, as morally loose, and also crazy. Peter Tosh understood the biases in the ganja suppression laws. He understood the class and the racial as well as cultural nature and the hypocrisy of this biasness. And you can hear it in songs such as Buckingham Palace. And he sings about Buckingham Palace because he used Buckingham Palace as a device in Buckingham Palace to go to where he felt, and rightly so, where such type of laws came from, the sources of those laws, which came about while Jamaica was still a colonial state, and which continued after independence. The only exception being when Michael Manley came to power, that the mandatory imprisonment for possession was taken out of the law. So that Buckingham Palace was used as a device to go where the authority globally was in respect of Jamaica and ganja. We go and burn it in a Buckingham Palace. Listen to Nango Jail, which was on his last LP. He uses that device again to show up the hypocrisy in the society. Say me nah go to jail for ganja no more. I man nah go to jail. You see this spliff here, sir? I just get it from a minister. He's my friend. Right? So he's using this device to show the hypocrisy in society. And let us be very clear. There were ministers and are ministers of government who smoke ganja. Prime Minister who smoke ganja in Jamaica. Let us be clear on that. Right? Let us be very clear. and that is what he was trying to point out, the hypocrisy. Right? Okay. And also listen to the bias that he brought out in What You Gonna Do. You know that song? Mama, mama, them old papa, say them hold him to smoke ganja. If me never jump the fence, them would have hold me too. So tell me, mama, what you gonna do? Huh? The cops say him and nobody, so him have to remain in custody. Him see the Babylon stand up and screw. Him say him never know it was a curfew. Right? So he has an entire body of work that speaks to the different aspects of the prejudice around this plant. And also, if you listen to Bush Doctor, it is coming out there quite clear. And also listen to his stage speeches and interviews. So that while partisan political campaigns, in-party political campaigns, Ganja did not figure much or at all, in Jamaican popular music, it was a central theme. That's where the campaigning was. And Peter Tosh was the central figure. But there were also very, very important figures in that. Just to mention three: Bob Marley, 3 o'clock roadblock, remember that one? Why can't we roam this open country? Remember that one? Culture, International Herb. And the classic from Sugar Minot, Oh, Mr. DC. Where's Bongo Herman? Coming from the country with a bag of Cali. Of course, I'm not a singer. Bongo Herman can do it much better. Right? But yes, these are some of the things. So that finally, apart from these classical examples, there are many, many more, numerous, hundreds, literally hundreds of songs talking about various aspects of this plant. So therefore, the herb could be said to be a main tenet of the manifesto of Jamaican popular music. I also remember Leonard Howell's sons, Monty and Blade. I interviewed them a few years ago, and they told me that the police extorted £3,000 from their father. The police actually held them at the police station. They were teenagers. The police held them at the station and sent to the father to say that if you don't give us £3,000, we're going to put some herb on your son. Right? And we all know that the laws have been used and abused to violate people's rights. And that is it. I don't find a title yet. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Clinton. Thanks for observing the time constraints. So we have a lot of speakers on the program. Ms. Heron is currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Leicester in the UK and works as a national program coordinator at UN Women Jamaica Program Office right here in Kingston. So without further ado, let's welcome Taitu Heron to the podium. Give thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Greetings. Greetings. Give thanks. What I'm about to present not just represents my voice, but also the voice of my sister and colleague, Yanni Q, with whom what I'm about to present also includes her input. What I wanted to focus on was Peter Tosh and what I'm calling, or what we are calling rather, anti-African existence in Jamaica. It comes from the journal article that myself and Yannick wrote and published in Caribbean Quarterly a few years ago, and it was initially based on a conference paper I had presented at a Caribbean Cultural Conference a couple of years before that. And the paper essentially looks at what we called Peter Tosh's word works, because we felt that they were more than lyrics, and the way in which he used words, as he was a wordsmith extraordinaire. And what we did was to really, and what we're attempting to do now is to uncover the spiritual dimensions of Peter Tosh's work within his existence at that time, and we had termed it an anti-African existence. And what is this anti-African existence? Essentially, the anti-African existence is when we have ideological and indoctrinating elements of the colonial experience and enslavement that took place in the English-speaking Caribbean that includes racist interpretations of Christianity that intensely sought to denigrate cultural, spiritual, and intellectual aspects of Caribbean civilization in order to justify the project of African enslavement and colonization in the Caribbean and other parts of the empire. In so doing, formal independence and governance and social mores continue to be premised on structures and value systems of inequalities of race, class, culture, and gender, shaped in being anti-African. Peter Tosh's music, or his lyrics rather, what we wanted to find out is related to several questions. How did he articulate his lyrics and his life and music, living in what he called fundamentally black, in an anti-African society that nevertheless was racially dominated and supposedly independent? Patrick Henry points out that we live on three planes of existence, three broad dimensions: the spiritual world of inner nature, the material world of outer nature, and the human world of social life. A human being in the world is challenged with achieving maximum human agency by managing the obstacles of his life or his or her life on these three planes. Our insertion in the material world challenges us to gain effective ways to control our natural environment. Our insertion in the human world of social life challenges us to intervene and participate in social processes that enhances human agency. Our insertion into the spiritual world of inner nature sets up a spiritual order that is both personal and impersonal. This unique consciousness that a culture lives and affirms is shaped by the responses to the constraints and possibilities on these three planes of existence. The historical insertion of enslavement and colonization caused severe disruption of the Africans that established between human agency and the imperatives of outer nature, inner nature, and spiritual social life. The forced relocation in the Caribbean meant that their worldview had to be reconstructed in the face of their culture, in the face of an imposed identity as slave instead of an African human being. So by the time we get to Peter Tosh, a couple centuries later, colonization had done a pretty good job. We had significant anti-colonial responses to colonization, including Marcus Garvey, Robert Love, and many others. But what is really the impact of this promulgation in the educational system, the newspapers, which in essence dehumanized blackness, denigrated cultural and religious expressions of anything identified as African, and promoted whiteness and European civilization as the perfect opposite? So Peter Tosh, in a sense, had represented a kind of what this had actually looked like, what we would call the religious and cultural schizophrenia. And he responds to it. And he looks at what this had represented and the influence that he had lived in his own times. I'll have to read the words. Peter Tosh says it so much better, you know? Really and truly. White man teach I and I, say I have to dead to go ahead and why? That them can come to Jamaica and take away the whole of the earth and inherit the earth. And we are go away, heaven, go and drink milk and honey, because we are fool for come treat black people. See the cross there, bear it, and Jesus him soon come back. Look how long would they away upon Jesus. And no, we can't make them little pirate them come here and rob the resources up rub up the resources of the country, because that is what they've been doing a long time. And I have to come together with love and respect to each other. Padre Henry reminds us that the indoctrination of Christianity through the missionaries gave us a dichotomy of God as European and the devil as African. And this perversely altered the inner codings of an African spirituality based on the existence of spiritual forces that extended beyond this simple binary. Having few other alternatives then, the neo-African soon equated the devil with spiritual entities which animated African-derived religions, and Jesus Christ was then offered as a suffering servant to emulate. Peter Tosh, years later, also put forward his own version of what he saw this as. In his song, You Can't Fool Me Again, okay, you wanna try it? I don't think it's gonna work. You can't click on it. Try it.
First you came and you sold us Christianity, but all your members just lust after vanity. Telling them a still faithful, not seen it slavery turn up for slavery. Brothers of heaven way up in the sky, where we can't reach unless we die. But you can't fool me again.
Right, thanks. So for Tosh, he had to, as a Rastafarian, he had to reinterpret the idea that each human being was made in the image of the Creator, and that for people of African descent, like Tosh, God simply had to become black.
This country of your long ages times, 400 years, and the same bucky master business, and black inferiority, and brown superiority, and white superiority. Rule this little black country of your long lives. Well, I come with earthquake, lightning, and thunder to break down these barriers of oppression, drive away transgression, and rule equality between humble black people.
Now, one of the things that was pointed out by Clinton earlier was that Peter Tosh continually, unfortunately, had the experience of being treated as a beast or as a non-human in Jamaica, even after independence. And this was given expression when efforts of reconstituting his own existence fails and leads to his own expression of a lamenting breaking point. On a stronger day, however, again, like the Orisha warrior Ogun, he steps out, and as a stepping razor, stepping out, as he does, is the embodiment of a new kind of person, a grand and clear declaration that takes a decisive ideological and cultural break from the colonial indoctrination of the African as beast. As Tosh was concerned, as far as he was concerned, he don't intend to subordinate to the colonial and slavery victimization and those shit stems that tend to incriminate and discriminate man, because that is totally illegal and unconstitutional, end quote. This act is a very conscious act and is based on a reclamation of the negated African self. And Tosh's stepping razor was sharp, cutting fearless, and decidedly uncompromising. Next one. Stepping razor. So, and he was very clear, if you want to live just treat me good. But he was not confined by his own set of contradictions. And despite being negated, he chose to be. His identity, very, very clear to him as African, was not only claimed, but put forward for others to know.
Where you come from, as long as you're a black man, you're an African. No matter your nationality, you have got the identity of an African.
So expressing oneself as an African within the confines of an anti-African existence entails a commitment to consciousness and a liberated one. As he said, I culture was taken away from I, miles from Africa, taken from Jamaica, but the culture was not taken out of I. His own word works. Through his word works, Tosh had a steadfast mission to create a path for a new moral order and vision for the peoples of the African diaspora. His contribution of a decolonized subjectivity is one that reclaims the humanity of Africans in this diaspora. As an African, he took on the mission of a clear path, clearing the path as an individual project of the self-embedded in I, but at the same time speaking to a broader community of African descendants. So it wasn't just I. Tosh initiates a set of potentially transformative modes of thought to bring forth a new moral order and to correct wrongs facilitated by the domination of power in social relations. However, this mandate is driven by an individual drive, in our sense, that negates the importance of the community within the African coding of inner nature as active participants and recipients of the message. Because he was alone a spirit, there is a sense in which the world's problems are taken on as his own personal burden, to the detriment of acknowledging the strength of a spiritual collective as central to operating within an African worldview. Tosh confronted the complexity of a fragmented African in the diaspora. He recognizes the falseness of this imago, rightly rejects it, and takes on a path of reclamation. He lives this reality in the midst of Babylon and thus requires a song. He manages to inscribe this in song. And his alternative musings are as such.
All my good life I've been a lonely man, teaching people who don't understand. And even though I try my best, I still don't find no happiness. Stop that train, stop that train, I'm leaving. Stop that train, I'm leaving, yeah. Said it won't be too long, whether I'm right or wrong. Won't be too long, whether I'm right or wrong.
So, in a sense, what Tosh had done in the midst of this anti-African existence was to offer alternative musings on being African as an identity to be proud of, on showing courage in this particular kind of anti-self-expression society. He created he exposed the legacy of Christian intolerance for those who wish to have an African identity. He exposed the submissive legacy of Christianity, which leaves the salvation and liberation of the self to God. He exposed the legacy of subservience, unquestioning subservience to authority, particularly white or light-skinned black, fair complexion, and male. What he does, in essence, is expose how much of our neocolonial heritage, for want of a better word, we have to learn from him now that he's not here, physically. His works, his word works, are an inspiration in the struggle for identity, and in this case, an African identity on his own terms, in spite of cultural opposition and social hostility. And for that, we must give thanks. Ashe.
All right, let's give Taito another round of applause for persevering. So right now it gives me great pleasure to bring up our next panelist, and this panelist has various distinctions. First of all, he's a black book publisher, he's a practicing attorney at law, he has the distinction of being the first person ever to sell black books from a retail outlet in Jamaica. He founded the first ever black bookshop in Jamaica, namely Head Start Books. Additionally, he's the first Rastafari in Jamaica to become an attorney at law. He's also a prolific black book publisher. The name of his publishing company coming under the same name as his retail outlet, Head Start Books. He has published numerous classic works, including the seminal book on Leonard Howell called Dread History, Leonard P. Howell and the Millenarian Visions in the early Rastafarian religion. That was by Robert Hill. He's also published Leonard Howell's classic Promise Key. He's also published Amy Jacques Garvey's classical seminal book, Black Power. He is also an activist in his own right, having filed a reparations lawsuit against the Queen of England in 2002, thus embedded himself firmly in the reparations movement in Jamaica. He's currently representing the family of Mario Dean, a young man, as we know, who died tragically while under the custody of the police in the Barnett Street police station in Montego Bay. And he has the distinction also of being an attorney for Peter Tosh when he was alive. So without further ado, let's welcome Ras Miguel Lam to the podium. Ras Miguel Lam.
Greetings and blessings. The title that I have in mind is, when I think of Tosh's, Almighty God is a living man. It's a part of his get up, stand up for your rights. In looking at Peter Tosh, Peter was born on the 19th of October, 1944. So therefore, this year would mark his 70th birthday. He joined the ancestors on the 11th of September, 1987. I would describe Peter as what we in West Africa call the Djeli, to spell D-J-E-L-I. The Djelis are the sacred custodian of the culture. The Djelis has the responsibility of being the narrator of his people's history and preserving the beliefs and ancient wisdom of the ancestors. The Djeli, it's really certain when I describe who's a Djeli, what might comes to many of your mind is the griot. The griot was actually the French word that they imposed rather than accepting the Bambara word of Djeli. And that is a category that I saw Peter. Peter's journey is a reflection of the journey of Rastafari, is a reflection of the journey of the black struggle in Jamaica, a reflection of the journey of our people. And why I say that? In fact, when I met Peter Tosh, my office was on 3 Duke Street, which was right in front of Victoria Mutual. So he was coming from over Victoria Mutual when he came to see me. he said to me, why the system and the system? And he kept saying, you know, sometimes a man have name, but him do have no fame. So I said, Peter, you mean, you have only for fame? He said, no, man. Him just coming from over Victoria Mutual. They had sent him a notice that he was about 4 months in arrears of his mortgage. So I said to him, they just come from a big world tour, you know, and of course to many people, world tours usually Europe and America. You just come from a big world tour, I see you on TV, whole heap, I read about it. Him say, yes. But at the end of the tour, the record company tell him, say, him break even. So I said, well, this thing and I adopt them, Peter. You can't just go out, sing out your voice and you break even. Him say, you have to understand, you know. When them have you drive up and down in them big limousine, put in them fancy hotel, fly your first class and all them things, and your money I pay for it, you know. So at the end of the tour, is my money pay for all them things there. And now I go have to go borrow some money for pay off this mortgage that them don't throw me out of my house up at Plymouth Avenue. So he kept saying, you know, you have name, but you don't have no fame. He felt that if he had fame, they wouldn't throw him out of his house. They wouldn't send him a notice. And right throughout, Peter kept thinking that way. That here he was on the front pages of many newspapers, but the next thing now he's being warned that his house might be going on auction shortly. I want you to remember that, this name without fame. The other aspect I want to highlight is the Peter Tosh and the Free Eye connection. Free Eye, and some of you might be old enough to know him as Jeff Dixon. And he was a disc jockey, JBC. He go abroad, went to America, did very well. Went to Africa, ended up managing a radio station in Uganda. So Free Eye came back now, and although he was doing some disc jockey work at JBC, that was not Free Eye's objective. Free Eye's objective was to own a radio station. It so happens that JBC Radio 1 was put up for sale. It was in Parliament. Free Eye made a bid for JBC Radio 1. When Siaga went to Parliament and announced that bids were closed, at the time when he announced bids were closed, apparently he himself did not look at all the bids. When they examined the bids, by far, Free Eye bid was the best bid. Initially, they had said that they would not open the bids to foreign investors. When Siaga realized now that the best bid was Free Eye bid, he went back to Parliament and said, "Hear what? We're going to open the bids to foreign investors." Free Eye saw this as a deliberate strategy to counter JBC Radio 1 being owned by local persons. The strength behind Free Eye was Peter Tosh. In 1983, Peter had signed a contract on behalf of his company, Intel Diplo. He had signed a contract with EMI. EMI gave him a portion of money. But when the album finished, Peter said to them, "Well, old man, this little money you want to give me, I can't really work out, you know. This thing not working out." Because at that stage now, Peter Peter needed a certain amount of money to ensure that Freya's bid for JBC Radio 1 was successful. And Peter kept telling Freya, don't worry, the money will come. Now, I was privy to be at some of those reasonings between Peter and Freya. Peter left with the master. The LP was no more nuclear war. Peter went up, met with the EMI people and said, look, old man, I have the thing ready, I have the master, I even play it, make them hear some of it. Them love it. But we have to talk some more figures, we have to talk some more dollars. Because, like I said, he now had a goal, and that goal was to ensure that they had enough millions to make sure they get JBC Radio 1. Well, the thing now with EMI and Peter, long and short, it ended up all in a court. EMI sued Peter and asked for an injunction that Peter be not permitted to leave New York with the master. So Peter and them in a one contanglement. I tell you frankly, he brought the contract to me that was signed in 1983. I have read that contract many times. Even to prepare for this lecture, I said, I can read this contract again. And brothers and sisters, all know I don't understand all of the contract. And that was always a problem when Peter said, boy, you know, them things are just part of the whole trickery. He really wanted to be the master of his destiny. And he felt that the more you get tied up with these people, is the more they keep robbing you. Because part of that contract was, he was to produce a first album. And EMI have the option to the second album. Then EMI have the option to the third album. And EMI have the option to the fourth album. And EMI have the option to the fifth album. And I said, Peter, but I don't see. In other words, if the first album is $10, what did I expect, say, the option for the second album must go up? There was no monetary figure beside the option for the second album. There was no monetary figure beside the option for the third album. So Peter started to say, now, old man, if we start wrong, we're going to keep ending up wrong. So, although the No More Nuclear War album was ready, it never really come up until about July 1987. Which turned out to be shortly before Peter passed. And like I said, through the matter ended up a court, injunction was placed on him that he cannot leave New York with the master. He ended up working out a thing with them, and that was how eventually the album came out. I'm saying all of this because, like I said, the core of Peter's mind when he went up with that was to get the backative that to back Freya that Rasta, black people would own a radio station. In other words, we would have predated IRFM. And it wasn't just a situation to play music. Freya, as everyone knows, was a very black conscious brother who wanted to really use the radio station to revolutionize things. The other aspect which I want to mention in regard to Peter Tosh was that, and my sisters referred to it in that 1978 peace concert, that speech. Now, again, I was fortunate to be there, and that whole concert, that whole thing was planned, orchestrated, and organized. The only part of the concert where mash up the whole script was Peter Tosh's speech. The whole thing was organized. I was part of the organizing backstage and all of that. The whole thing about Jacob Miller to call on stage Bucky Massa and Claude Massop and Tony Welch, that was organized. The whole thing about Bob Marley to call Siaga and Manley on stage was also organized. Well, they had asked Peter to call some people on stage, but Peter said, no, none of that, because I'm not in this peace business. So when Peter started out by saying, this concert here, first of all, and when brother Sir Hutton was up here, and the light business, that was outstanding. Peter said, hold on. And he started to talk. He said, don't take the light them out of my face, no man, make I see my people. I can't see my people them. And thing. So they have to turn off some of the lights and say, yes man, I can't see black people now, make me talk. So he started. This concert here, well, them say is a peace concert. And I wonder if many people realize that what the word peace means. Him said peace is the diploma you get in the cemetery. On top of your grave that is marked, here lies the body of John Stokes, rest in peace. So that was how Peter started out. Then Peter now started to go on, and I won't read all of it, but some of it. And learn this man. I'm glad all the Prime Minister is here, and the Minister of Opposition and members of Parliament. We can't make this little pirate them come here and rob up the resources of the country, see? Because that is when they've been doing long. And of course, they use certain blood bath and blood clot, And our poor Jamaican people are back shit out of hog mouth. See? Them the thing that fit done with. No. Like I said, this wasn't part of the script. At the end of the speech, the PNP vexed with Peter, because according to them, he embarrassed Manley. The JLP them vexed with Peter, because he embarrassed Siala. So serious business, And a whole heap of them and the goons were backstage. All of the leadership of gunmanism was there. So the man them know thing. But Peter now make it clear. So brethren, I am not loyal to none of them, because the two of them suppress me. The two of them beat him up, the two of them this, the two of them make him affair. When him say when him come in from the country, him affair tighten up him bottom and all them waiting for bringing a little draw herbs and all them things. So him not really have no loyalty to either of them. He went on, Jamaica is one of the richest West Indies country in the world. Learn that. Jamaica can feed the world with food. I see thousands of acres of land lying down there. We would have planted herb and make shipments of herb and go away. Go make cure glaucoma. See? So we don't want them the business there. We want equal rights and justice. Then he went on. This colonial shit system here will rule the underprivileged. I am one of them who happen to be in the underprivileged sector. See? Hassled by police brutality, times and times again. After I run up and down, for what? Me just have a little spliff in my pocket, or have a round of herb, or go buy a dry. Yeah, tell the truth. And he went on. Him say, I want a little oil for cook all my food. Me can't get them thing there. And I have to set up this country here and eliminate all those shit system that black people don't live in confusion. Because hungry people are angry people. I'm not a politician, but I suffer the consequences. Now, like I said, I know all of them been vexed. Manley them been vexed, Sierra them been vexed, and so on. So, a few weeks later, that was when Peter get a proper beating, And again, is somebody have to come tell me, say, that beating never connected to the speech at the peace concert. Because like I say, he seemed to have embarrassed everybody. And out of half a tree, they could draw herbs, and they beat him out there so, then draw him over station. Peter himself said, he had to play dead to the beating them when better get. If he never keep quiet, he might just keep getting more beaten and more broke up. He was charged, went to court, and was acquitted. Because in the midst of all of that, nobody knew where the little herbs was. And so we have this situation where that after that beating, there's no secret that Peter make up his mind now. Say, boy, Virgin, me not go to jail again for ganja. I'm not going to no jail. And even if you take him alone for parade out at half a tree with him spliff, he's going to do that. So in terms of the advocacy for the legalization of ganja, we all know all the songs. He was very forthright. He was very strong. He honestly felt that ganja should be legalized. As we see now, it is efforts of people like Peter Tosh that we are getting nearer. The government has been playing around, playing politics, playing everything with ganja except doing the right thing. No one knows what their policy is. One moment they say this, one moment they say that. But the reality of it is that ganja is not yet legalized in Jamaica, when in my view, it ought to be legalized. Brother Michael mentioned the Mario Dean situation, and you can't help but escape the parallel that here is a young man on his way to work, need the dress, bag need the packed, had all him accoutrements and work things, and of course had him little herbs, him lighter and him lunch, and because of a spliff taken to the station, and with a boldness like Peter Tosh said, that's why I don't like police, you know. Peter Tosh said in his song, every time I see Babylon, my blood run cool. Every time I see the wicked men, my belly move. But Peter get beaten for that. Mario Dean got his death. In concluding, brothers and sisters, what we need to do, like I said, the whole death of Peter Tosh, and there were other court cases, you know. Him and almost all of you sit up there with the album them, were put out on a different label. Peter and almost all of those people was in court at some point. You see, every time you try to be the master of your thing, when you start to decide now, say, look, it's my thing and me decide what should be my price, what should be my payment. Well, I tell you, them have a way to get rid of you. Even Bob had reached that stage now where him just want to fulfill certain parts of the contract and then set up him one thing and do him one thing. And you see, them get rid of them. So, one of the things that I really want us to think about at this Peter Tosh lecture is, if you control many other things, but some or other, if you don't control your political destiny, as long as that rules you, it seems to be able to overpower you, and you end up at the bottom and them stay at the top. Give thanks, brothers and sisters.
Give thanks, Ross Miguel. Right about now, we're gonna just to change up the rhythm, so to speak. We're gonna have a very short musical interlude. I'm gonna ask the esteemed, well-known, and very prolific artist, history man, to make himself avail himself and to do his tribute to Peter Tosh. So we're gonna have just a momentary break, and then we're gonna go to our other speaker, Brother Ever Gordon. But I just want to change the rhythm a little bit, you know. Yes, so History Man, come forward.
Inventors and their invention. To know about them we need information. Africans inventors and their invention. Wanna listen to the informative history man. Africans make paper, chess and alphabet. Father of medicine, the great Imhotep. Africans, we are the head of civilization. European popular invent by James Adam. Black people know yourself and try stand up firm. Biscuit cutter made by A.P. Asburn. Make me see the hands them on support dead. L.C. Bailey invent the folding bed. Watch it big tree and mind you get a small axe. E.G. Beckett invent the letterbox. He do the work and Babylon take the fame. Isaac Johnson invent the bicycle frame. R.B. Spike said that we must take a lift. And him invent the automatic gear shift. How we invent most of the things on the scene. Augustus Jackson invent the ice cream. Dewey Sanderson say we are kings and queen. And him invent the urinalysis machine. Elijah Mackay invent lubricator. John L. Love invent pencil sharpener. Maurice W. Lee invent the pressure cooker. A.L. Lewis invent window cleaner. Take plane without shoes from out of Jamaica. That was invented by Mota Baruka. Africans inventors. At it up. Peter Tosh. No Babylon no like them and so them beat him up. No Peter Tosh. The man say legalize the herb, the chalice I feel like so Peter Tosh. No Babylon no like them and so them beat him up. Peter Tosh was born in 1944, October 19. Oh yes, this is sure. Real revolutionary true Rastaman. Born in a Green Jill down a Westmoreland. Big up Peter, mother name is Alvira. A one son she have no must remember. As a little youth, resting at the country, at the age of 15, moved to Kingston City. Him used to rest up monks one name auntie. Them time they him no link up yet with Bob and Bunny. Peter Tosh used to live in a trench town area. Practicing guitar, he was a guitar player. Jamaican people no hear the one here. Peter Tosh used to be an apprentice tailor. Peter Tosh. The man say legalize the herb, the chalice and feel like some Peter Tosh. No Babylon no like them and so them beat him up. No Peter Tosh. The man say legalize the herb, the chalice and feel like some Peter Tosh. No Babylon no like them and so them beat him up. 1963 link up with Bob and Bunny, and I saw the three of them start to part together. After that them link up with Joyce the teacher. Jerry Green, Beverly Hills from Broadway together. 1963 them put the group together. How would them call them the wheelie no wheeler? Peter Tosh was the only instrument player. A self-taught guitarist and a keyboard player. 1964 them get them first major hit. Simadong was the name and the title of it. 1974 when the group gets split. Peter first solo album named Legalize It. Get up, stand up, a Peter Tosh write it. 400 years a Peter Tosh write it. Stop that train, a Peter Tosh write it. No sympathy, a Peter Tosh write it. Peter Tosh. The man say legalize the herb, the chalice I feel like so Peter Tosh. No Babylon no like them and so them beat him up. No Peter Tosh. The man say legalize the herb, the chalice I feel like so Peter Tosh. No Babylon no like them and so them beat him up. Release a lot of singles and plenty LP. 1976 a legalized LP. 1977 equal rights LP. 1978 a Mr. LP. 1979 a Mystic Man LP. Wanted General Live a 81 LP. Mama Africa done 1983. 1988 Peter won the Grammy. Peter Tosh Word, sound and power. At the time them used to call them stepping razor. When them used to live up in a St. Andrew area. And them used to be a one-wheel cycle rider. 1983, listen to me statement. Peter Tosh car meet in a one big accident. I hold up on the mic, not the great history man. In a the accident, him lost him girlfriend named Ivan. Peter Tosh, Peter Tosh. The man said legalize the herb, the chalice and feel like a Peter Tosh, Peter Tosh. No Babylon, no like the man said them beat him up enough. Peter Tosh, Peter Tosh. The man said legalize the herb, the chalice and feel like a Peter Tosh, Peter Tosh. No Babylon, no like the man said them beat him up enough. Big up Peter Tosh, cause him a real superstar. Him last album with him no nuclear war. Them kill Peter Tosh, but me no know the reason. How one gunshot him get in him head. That brown and free and him next two friend dead. Have 4 gunmen, listen to me history. Lepo, Yahweh, Skipper and Mikey. Santa get a few shot, but him never dead. Mike's get a few shot, but him never dead. Marlene get a gunshot, but she never dead. Enough gunshot like a big shootout. Mama Joy get a shot in her foot and her mouth. Jah bless them soul because them never drop out. Big up Peter, sons and daughters all about. History man depend on my economy, I sing it out. Big up Copeland, Farm and Herbie Miller. The two used to be Peter Tosh manager. 2012 for no must remember. Receive the order of merit from Sister Portia. Peter Tosh, Peter Tosh. The man said legalize the herb, the chalice and feel like some Peter Tosh, Peter Tosh. No Babylon, no like the man said them beat him up enough. Yes I, Selassie I, Jah, Rastafari, give thanks.
Let's give it up for Elder God. All right. Brothers and sisters, good evening. When I was asked to give a presentation with this Peter Tosh thing, I was very, very apprehensive in terms of the fact that when I did the Redix, the interview for the Redix, I had spoken at length about my involvement with Peter Tosh, and for over 45 minutes. And what troubled me is that when the film came out, the documentary came out, rather than giving some of what I said, all the man said was that I knew that Peter Tosh was going to die, which is what I said, but the context in which it was being said, it wasn't contextualized. So people end up seeing that documentary, felt that ever wanted Peter to die, but there was nothing like that, right? So I was kind of hesitant about this until Michael somehow talked me into doing it, so here I am. My presentation is kind of slightly different from most of the persons who have spoken because I've been asked to speak about my relationship with Peter Tosh, and I can't give it all because I'm writing a book, so that will, eventually come out of the book, But I want to just give a brief rundown because I don't know for some of you, I find it that I don't like to go to funerals, but when I do attend funerals, one thing that always amazes me is when people are talking about those who have passed away, you always get this story that you have to stop and want to say, was that really the same person one you? Because everybody's speaking such glowing terms that, it really leaves you baffled. I'm not going to speak anything derogatory about Peter Tosh because he's not here to defend himself. So I've kind of put my thing in the context of the Peter Tosh
compassionate act presentation. When I was a youth growing up, we used to be terrified of the persona given to the Rasta man, known back then as the Black Art Man. We traveled to and from schools in groups for fear that were we to travel in any other formation and come upon a Black Art Man, he would take us away. Domestic violence drove me away from my parents' house between the age of 12 and 13. I ended up in Bakawad, where other hobos like myself, runaway youths like myself, found themselves in the refuge. Yeah, thank you very much, Shirley. We found ourselves among the Rasta, the Black Art Man, whom I was so terrified of when growing up. The love and the compassion the fraternity showed me was entirely different from the garbage fed to me about how dangerous they were. Back then, they called me juvie. And I was given a gambling house to man, collecting what is known as less. For the housemaster was a man called Brady and his wife Cherry, who acted as my guardian. Eventually, my mother sent out trackers for me, and they found me and sent me back to my mother's house. I stayed there for a while, and as I grew, I ran away again because the domestic violence was too much for me to take. And I ran away, came back again to Kingston, but I was floating between Kingston, Spanish Town, and Monterey, different cities. I ended up eventually working at Bauxite, named Bauxite in St. Elizabeth, and there they had a lot of fight going on between the NW and the BITU. The BITU was very, very upset with the fact that Jamaica Labour Party was in power, but the NW was the bargaining organizers, the union for the workers. One day we were going to work and a fight took place between some workers and the guards. A shot was fired, grazed a guy. He was held, went over, started to speak to the guy who fired the shot, which was a white man, of course. And we ended up taking away the gun from him. It was very early in the morning, so we were waiting on the NW union to come on the site. And while we were there waiting, Shearer, the Prime Minister, had just formed a group of policemen called the Armoured Barracks. And their authority was to beat or do whatever, shoot and then question, don't argue. So they came in by about 8 o'clock while we were waiting at the union. And when they came, they started beating those workers who were just coming to work. And so I left and I came to Kingston, run away with a gun. The 60s was a time of turmoil and upheaval and unrest, as independence was being questioned by the working class, who could not and still can't determine where in the out of many we fall. The pun is intended, as most of the death were at the hands of the police and are still borne by the working class, which also make up the prison population, which I was soon to find out after I was held with the gun at this student union at the University of the West Indies and sent to prison one night when King Tubby's clashed with terror over at the student union. Having neither connection, as Jamaica is primarily run by connections, nor money to employ proper legal service, I was railroaded to prison. Another fellow, whom I knew absolutely nothing about was charged with me. All I knew is that I eventually got to find out his name was Rat. And Rat was jointly charged with me, sent to prison, although I went to court and told them that Rat wasn't there when this, whatever you call it, was committed, crime or whatever the case may be. Rat still was sent to prison, and ironically, Rat blamed me for his imprisonment. What can I tell you? We grew up with the Wailers' music. They were our Bob Dylan and our Joan Bass. They were our voice of protest, the voice of the sufferer, but also echoed the sentiment of the rude boys culture, which was pervasive among city youths determined to forge an identity of self. Needless to say, the devastating the news was when the breakup came to us in prison in 1974. All over the prison, the topic was being discussed for days, and some expressing hope that this was just a little hiatus amongst the Wailers. They would soon regroup. But sadly, that never happened. Instead, each member of the group started putting out his own music, thereby attracting his own following. Winston Herbert McIntosh, born October 19, 1944 at Church, Lincoln, Grangeville, Westmoreland, the son of Alvera Morris and James McIntosh, stood out to me because of the in-your-face expressiveness of the contents of his music and the subject issues he raised. I don't know if the fact that his mother went into labor with the threat of a hurricane, packing winds of excess of 160 miles per hour, heading towards Jamaica, or whether or not the fact that World War II was in full speed, why he had this rebel attitude that attracted me. I'm a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So I jumped in the back of the car, Copeland was in front of the car. And when I got in the car, I showed him the book and he said, "Have you taken the book from my house?" I said, "No, man, but we can't tell you how we get this book." And it was at that juncture that he said to me, "I am going to use this Virginia Copeland for us to manage me." So I said to him, "Okay, fine, go ahead." And I mean, if he's good, just use him, Looking back, I kind of realized now that that was a bad thing for me to have said, because Copeland couldn't really manage Peter on the international level that Peter was on. Moving out of Irby House, we had no office space, and Prilly Hamilton from Third World, it was Third World Lead Singer, told me about the office space around by Waterloo Road that they had for rent. And so I carried Peter around there, myself and him and Marley went around there. He liked the office space and we decided we were going to take it. But Prilly's partners decided that they didn't want to give Peter the space because he was too rebellious. Prilly eventually talked them into giving Peter the space, and that was the beginning of Peter's office, where Intel Dipper started. Soon after we started the office, it was long after that Bob died. And when Bob died, we were talking about it, and to be honest with you, Peter was a little bit, what can I say? I want to use the right word because the man is not here to defend himself. Peter was a little bit, Jesus. I don't want to say, I didn't feel any remorse, put it that way. I didn't feel any remorse from Peter about Bob's death. And to tell you the truth, I had questioned him on more than one occasion as to why the Wailers had disintegrated. And he was very adamant that it was Bob being influenced by white whale, as he called black whale. And Bob sold them out. And he kept telling me about things like, although it is he who taught Bob music, Bob didn't deal with him with any respect. Yeah? And he would show me instances where they would be going down the street, for instance, and probably Bob would probably buy support vendor, buy 2 orange or 2 ripe banana, give one to Bunny, take one for himself, and then just keep moving. So it showed me that as to why, he was so, so kind of bitter towards Bob. So much so that if he was going on the street and a Bob Marley was being played on the radio with us in the car, he'd immediately switch the station. Peter doesn't listen to Bob. Yeah? However, with Bob then, he was the heir apparent for the reggae king. Copeland brought in Danny Sims. Danny Sims' reggae music is like Don King to boxing. Don King, they also brought a British girl who's an accountant called Janet Pearson. She later manages Maxi Priest. And together they started to concoct their own brand of owning Peter to themselves, because Peter was now going to be king. They started to get people moving away from Peter, push away people who were close to him and could give him whatever advice that they were giving him. And it happens that Danny Sims started to invest his money in Peter. I really didn't take too light to Danny Sims. They couldn't get rid of Marlene and they couldn't get rid of me. I'm going to be very, very frank, because I don't want to paint myself as any paragon of virtue, yeah? Peter started touring, and he toured a lot. I was living by Windsor Avenue, Ibu Cooper, and myself. And Marlene and I started getting very, very close. And these tours that Peter leave, Marlene and I get very, very close. And it grew closer and closer. Until one day, I turned to her, and it's, sometimes, on hindsight, you ask a question and say, well, if I had my life to live over, what would I ask a question? I asked her how she and Peter got together. And the story she gave me was very, very frightening. Didn't really expect that. I'll only say it in my book. I'd never say it that. She started crying. The car that I was using at the time to do Peter's business was my own personal car. And eventually, the doors started flying. I'd be driving on the road and doors fly, And he started to say to me that, Peter's a man who believes in a lot of double story. If you were to listen to Peter speak double story, if you don't mind chapter and word, start saying double too. Because he tells them convincingly, anybody who knows Peter, right? I remember him telling me about one double story in particular where ghosts held him down. And he couldn't speak, he couldn't move. No movement. And he heard a voice say, Bumbo Clat. He said, Bumbo Clat! And the duppy let him go. And that was how he came to realize that Bumbo Clat is a word to be used to push away duppy. Anyway, my fault was that Marlene and I became very, very close. And I did a breach. Like Arthur and Lancelot. Yeah? Or like David and Uriah. Yeah, it happens to the best of us. Yeah? Looking back, I realized how wrong I was. But you can't cry over spilled milk, my brethren. It's done and gone. When I realized what was happening, I said, he came back, and based on what she told me, I think more or less that probably the relationship would have, terminated, And I realized that she was still going on with him. So I said, no, let me go by myself. And I left, and I went and I set up a business independent of what we were doing with Peter over by Kencut, and published my book, Arise. Copeland, before I left, Copeland one day came to me and Copeland said to me, Eva, I think I want to get Marlene into a business for herself so that she can move and stop interfering in the music business because she doesn't know it. And every time, a business deal comes up, she interferes with it. So in thinking about it, I said to myself, it is not a bad idea to have gotten her into her own business. And she has a sense of fashion. And I remember a store used to be at King's Plaza called G's One of a Kind. And I said it wouldn't be a bad idea to get her to set up a store like G's One of a Kind. And when the traveling takes place, she go away and buy the things and put in the store. Little did I know that Copeland was setting me up because he later used that information to manipulate the relationship between Marlene and I. For me, I'm going to cut my thing short because in essence of time, I want to touch on what Miguel Lon said a while ago about the death of Peter Tosh. Peter Tosh has reached a stage where Marlene tried to manipulate Peter to a point whereby I was wondering of all the women that he has had, oh, this little one is able to manipulate him to that extent. I knew he told me about her bird being born the 19th of October like himself, so he felt more or less that this was a godsend. But there was something else to it that I couldn't understand. Anyway, Peter started to act very obstreperous towards his friends and his close colleagues, including Bono Whalers. You know what I mean? Anything that Marlene tells him, he acts on it without any reasoning, without any conversation. She tells him things and he just acts on it, yeah? Including me, his son, manager. It was just like Peter getting off. Eventually, Peter trimmed Anaya Bingaman, whom Marlene told him came to the house and stole a ring. That sent the whole thing into a different framework. One day I'm downtown, Miguel Lon is his lawyer, and I saw Miguel walking on the street because you don't know, with Peter chopping me, I was hospitalized for 3 days. Miguel Lon is his lawyer. Miguel Lon is tight into the whole running, so I saw Miguel, so I said, Miguel, you know what I like to talk to you for a minute? He said, no man, I'm very, very busy. I don't have any time now. But he said, you know what, come down to my office and let us speak for a minute. I gave a minute or so. About 2.5 hours into the minute, Miguel and I were still talking. Because Miguel realized that I was telling him things which Peter wasn't privileged to. So Miguel got up and decided he was going to check Peter. He said, no, ever something I want to Peter, no about anything about him. So he left and he went to Peter to check Peter. So when I reached to Peter and said, Peter, you and I are supposed to talk. Miguel is here, qualified. My name came up and Marlene was eavesdropping. So the moment my name came up and Miguel is telling Peter that we need to talk, he and I. Marlene jumped and said, let over my dead body, who for signing the pan and get ballistic on Miguel. I thought that was one of the downward spiral for the relationship between Miguel and Peter. The Peter I knew was the man who was into gun. So upon his death, I was frightened to hear about Lepo going to prison for him because Lepo took the rap for Peter with a gun. Anybody who knows Peter very well, the only gun Peter speaks about is lightning ball. Yeah? And he tells you that he'll shoot you with lightning ball and use him father, thunder, and lick it up. Yeah? I'm going to end here because there's a question and answer. Thank you for listening to me.
Give thanks ever. All right. And that was a very personal perspective. I'd like to take the time out to recognize in the audience Warrell King and Cordell Green, who have trailblazed this symposium. Could you stand, gentlemen, and be recognized? Warrell King and Cordell Green. Well, Cordell, we all know Cordell. It's Warrell Tree is not too. Anyway, right now we're gonna try and move things forward. I just, if you indulge me, we're gonna take some question and answer.
You know, when I hear people make presentation about Rastafari people, rather Peter Tosh about Rastafari people, whatever reason don't you mention about Haile Selassie? Me, I'm a kind of really get a little bit questioning, you know? Why we speak about Rastafari people and all the move spirituality and all these things that would influence them, but there's no mention about really what Haile Selassie has influenced those persons. Where they more thinking of equal rights, when they think about Africa. What about this mystic man thing? Where is the role of Haile Selassie China? As in Bible speaking at all. Haile Selassie, because he must have been reading some of these things. How is it that they influence Peter Tosh? Outlook on life.
Yes. So you're saying basically Peter never made mention enough of Haile Selassie?
Why is that people who speak on Rastafari people including Peter Tosh?
Yeah.
Make no mention of the role of Haile Selassie in those persons' liberty and our view reality, etc. And it's easy to play the role, but we want to get an understanding from persons. But Haile Selassie is not job.
Yes. Ross, we get it.
Very, very, very good thought process, my brother. Very good. I'm thinking of that whole aspect of Isis, Osiris, Horus. Peter knew of that. Those are things that I and Peter sit down and reason with in terms of, so the aspect of God, the divinity of God transcending in man upon the earth. That was something that I and him would have reasoned about, and he understood that, and therefore now we would bring that now to Haile Selassie being the Almighty One upon creation at this time. This is something that we would go into, but like what I ever said, there was that era of time when he would find time to find I, or I to find him, and that reasoning would go on until hours in the night, hours late, 4 or 5 o'clock. Morning start to come up, and it just wouldn't be just me and him alone. Bonnie would be there too.
Exactly. Music.
You know.
Here's what these things come down to the music.
Yes.
But I don't ever speak of these things, ever speak of these.
That is true, my brother. So I'm glad you have raised it, and so on. And we would have that reasoning, and so on. But gradually, because then, like I said, it's strange for somebody to be at that level, and one would blame a woman for bringing you to another level. But so many great men, I myself couldn't understand it, and so on. Because at that stage now, logic gone through the window at that stage. And many of those type of reasoning that we would have. Because we would listen to the chakras, you know. We would reason about, he understood Goddess Kali, Lord Rama, Krishna. In other words, even the Hindu influence in Jamaica to help us to understand that iris of Rastafari. Peter and I reason about that at length for hours, many nights with herbs and coffee. Love him coffee and I love my coffee. I would have drink a whole for coffee, whole for herbs. And at the end of all of that, now he would have that I think it's a DX7. Yeah. And he would have did a music come up and an idea come up and so on, you know. And he would drive go as far as Greenwich Farm, go buy fish and come back and cook. And find every reason to keep you when you're on that level. Right. But I really don't have the answer as to how things just deteriorate to a level whereby that type of reasoning now gone through the window, and it led eventually, like the brother said, his whole mystical vibration now seemed to have disappeared, and accused brethren to steal a ring and all the madness there, and so on. Peter come in my office them day and he said, what a little fool typewriter you have. Sure. And the next thing him travel, him come back and bring a big typewriter coming up. Say, boy, such and such. Me and him have my little baby born at the hospital. Me and him go bring home mama and so. When I go home, him see the crib. Him say, sure. He drive go down and buy a big wicker crib, come back up, struggle up, type on the vehicle, bring it up. So that is the Peter. But as time goes on, man, things just deteriorate, brethren. But like I said, the Rastafari, the Almighty God is the living man. He understood that and he was able to explain it. To the point now where I was begging him that when he travels abroad, he need to explain that aspect to the world press. When they come to talk to him, to explain why we hail Haile Selassie as the Almighty I.
Just give thanks. Having Sister Taito, you wanted to say something? Yes.
I wasn't planning to talk about gender, but it looked like them drama talk. One of the things about some of the African dimensions of spirituality is the central role that women play in introducing and telling the story of rebuilding the African family and how those in the diaspora can reclaim a space for the African dimensions of spirituality. When you look at revival, the African-derived ones here, when you look at Kumina, women are a central part of those religious or African-derived expressions. Rastafari, on the other hand, while it is strongly rooted in African-centeredness, is also strongly male-dominated. One of the things that I heard coming out of the presentations was this blame towards Peter's partner towards the end in terms of where he was going in a certain direction that was moving him towards Africa. Now, I don't have the personal experiences that you'd have had with Peter, of course. My source is primarily through his music, my own spiritual insights, and of course what I've read, interviews and so on. But it couldn't help but strike a chord as a woman listening that here we go again, from the Garden of Eden, a woman is being blamed for everything. And I think we need to rethink that idea, because I don't think any of us should doubt Peter's own capacity to think for himself. I also don't think we should also doubt Peter's capacity to value the woman that he had. He would not have listened to her and done everything what she told him to do unless he felt that she had a valid point. So he obviously felt that she was worthy. Now, not all of us like that. Some men are actually threatened when we have relationships that a man and his woman explore or demonstrate that kind of partnership. But those kinds of partnerships do exist. And I don't think anything is wrong with it. As a matter of fact, those kinds of partnership can assist us in rebuilding the African family, because it dismantles some of the negative aspects of patriarchy that demean women.
Me know the total injustice of oppression. Me say me know the total injustice of oppression. Rasta know the total injustice of oppression. But we have to endure as a conquering lion. Me say me know the total injustice of oppression. Me say me know the total injustice of oppression. But we we have to endure as a conquering lion. Frustration causing victimization, raging all over the land. So give me more vision to lead I along. But we must overcome for the power of the higher one. Thank you, Jaja. Frustration is long. So give me knowledge and wisdom. Let we educate the youth them. Don't turn to violence. So we won't have no grave digger nor no pallbearer. Or rest I know the total injustice of oppression. Me say me know the total injustice of oppression. Me say me know the total injustice of oppression. But we have to endure as a conquering lion. I hear the cry of another. Yes, it's another weeping soul. When frustration, we are never alone. I hear the cry of another. Yes, it's another weeping soul. When frustration, we are never alone. So lift up your head to consciousness. Hold the order. Keep the faith. It's all over the land. Strive along in consciousness. Too long the cry of frustration, but we now give up on the higher one, our soul provider in Zion. Me say me know the total injustice of oppression. Me say me know the total injustice of oppression. Rasta know the total injustice of oppression, but we have to endure as a conquering lion.
Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah. Amoyish, whoa, whoa. Legalize it, marijuana for smoke. Legalize it, Rasta not take coke. Legalize it, this is one you no joke. Legalize it, right now me want smoke when me tell them. Me have me lighter, me want me rizzler. If me can make it myself, me go check sizzler. Then me make an extra round of fire mama. Jamaica land of the best farmer. When me want a good charge, I know if he send me. Babylon don't run in, you can't friend me. Cause you not get a jar out of me sense. And the final warning is not no semi, hey. Legalize it, marijuana for smoke. Legalize it, Rasta not take coke. Legalize it, this a one ya no joke. Legalize it, right now me want smoke. You get the strongest meditation when you take a one spliff. Get it in a medicine when you're feeling sick. Call by many names, herb, giant and stick. Me want feel ice and it on real quick. Was brought to Jamaica in 1882. In 1919 was smoked by a few. Give a positive vibe, keep the farmers cool. Removing the banner as the ultimate goal. Hey, legalize it, marijuana for smoke. Legalize it, Rasta not take coke. Legalize it, this a one ya no joke. Legalize it, them never know say in the Bible. Read Genesis 1 verse 29. Smoking bring connection with the holy and divine. Send it up in a me cranium, me now waste time. If you come this religiously, combine a King Selassie, I remedy no more reading. Condemning cannabis a blasphemy. Stop the prosecution of spiritual healing. Was highly represented by Pop Marley. Hey, legalize it, marijuana for smoke. Legalize it, Rasta not take coke. Legalize it, this a one ya no joke. Legalize it, right now me gas Remember when me tell them, hey, I legalize it. Make me advertise it, yeah. I legalize it, yeah. Make me advertise it, boy. Legalize it. Acts, give thanks.
Yeah, let's give it up. Let's give it up for Sister Pawage. Legalize it.